Welcome to the Piston Fanatic. I am your host, Dave Dalton, and I am excited to share my passion and perspective of our Detroit Pistons as we go on this fantastic voyage together. I've been a diehard Piston fan since the days of Dave Bing and Bob Lanier. I've also been a varsity basketball coach of a very successful program in northern Michigan. Currently, my daughter and I are coaching one of the best AAU teams in the country. Well, Piston fans, the Pistons did a great job again. They hired another assistant coach. We hired Steven Silas as our head number one assistant, and now we hired Dan Burke. And Coach Burke is just what we need. He is a masterful defensive-minded coach. He's 64 years old or 64 years young, but he is a brilliant defensive mind, and he's coached some of the better defenses. He worked with the Trailblazers from 89 to 87. And he worked with the Pacers when Larry Bird was here and Isaiah Thomas. We worked for 6 different coaches for the Pacers, and that's never happens in NBA basketball. Assistants jump from job to job, but this guy was so impressive that he stayed from 97 to 2020 with the Pacers. Recently, Doc Rivers hired him just to be his defensive special coordinator, and he didn't even know, he didn't have a prior relationship with Coach Burke, but he just knew of his reputation and saw what he had done earlier. He was a mastermind when the Pacers almost knocked off the Chicago Bulls when they had Michael Jordan. It went down to the wire in that series, but he designed the defense that was so effective. Doc Rivers knows, because Doc Rivers, I shared this story once before, I think, but I was at a Piston game playing the Celtics either in 04 or 05, I think, and the Celtics that's when they had Paul Pierce, but they have Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen and that team. But I was blown away. I mean, I'm at that game, and we have that great team with Chauncey and Rip and Ben Wallace and Rashid and Tayshaun, and we could not hardly breathe. Their defense was so incredible. But that was Tom Thibodeau, and again, it's been questioned how good of a head coach Tom Thibodeau is, but he is a masterful defensive coach, and so is Coach Burke. So I'm excited to see that. You know, he coached with Philly. They were ranked second one year and 12th one year and 8th the other year, the 3 years that he was at Philadelphia recently. So when Doc lost his job, then Dan Burke became available. So I am thrilled. I've listened to him speak on an interview before. He sounds very intelligent and very classy, and I'm excited that we hired him. We also, it looks like we're probably going to get Mark Bryant, that is probably going to come over with Monty he was on his staff in Phoenix, and I'm really hoping that we get Jarrett Jack. I used to watch him play. He's a tough player, and I know that a lot of the players on the Phoenix Suns team really admired and respected Jarrett Jack. So we'll see whether it's not for sure whether he's coming or not, but there's a good chance that he is. So, but we're going to talk about the draft, and we're going to kind of analyze different options and the different spots in the draft. And first, we're going to talk about rehash the players in the draft. I know you maybe are tired of this, but it is. I know some people are interested in it. I know there's a lot of debate among Piston fans about who should we take at number 5. Again, my first fear is I've been saying I want Cam Whitmore, and I still believe that. The problem is he had one of the best workouts of any player, and a lot of the NBA front offices are buzzing about his workout that he had, his pro day, and so there's speculation that he could rise, to even 3 or 4 in the draft, and so we wouldn't be able to pick him at 5. The other fear is I shared that Troy might not take him at 5 even if he was available. So we'll see what happens, but I just know that he is got the highest upside. He is to compare him to his other players, I just think he can play the 3 or the 4, and we're going to talk more about Jarrett Walker. A lot of people want Jarrett Walker, but Jarrett Walker doesn't shoot as well as he does. He maybe has a little more upside on defense, but Jarrett Walker is a 4 and not a 3. And he's more of a 4-5, where Cam is a 3-4. I think Cam's upside for his shooting is significantly better. And again, the playoffs are proof that it just comes down to who shoots the 3. Like 80% of the games I think I heard that there was a study done that 80% of the games are won by the team that makes the best percentage on threes. So that's a shortage. The problem that the Pistons have. Our three-point shooting is not, we just do not have a lot of good three-point shooters on our team. But again, Cam Whitmore has a lot more than, he's not. There still is questions about his shooting. I mean, the one guy that there's not questions about his shooting on would be, sorry about that, would be Taylor Hendricks. And I love Taylor Hendricks. So if we can't get Cam Whitmore, I hope that we get Taylor Hendricks. Now, Taylor Hendricks does not have probably the upside, but he's shown flashes of being able to pass good, but he's a great weak side defender where he blocks shots at a really high rate. He reacts really quickly, but he's a knockdown three-point shooter. And so his floor is so high just because he's a really good defender and he's a really great three-point shooter. And again, our team does not have enough of those. And so he is a better three-point shooter for sure than Cam Whitmore. So a lot of places have him ranked lower. I mean, the rankings are all over the place. I listened to two guys today that had Cam Whitmore, both that work for No Ceilings. They had him rated at 9th. So a lot of different things can happen. But Jarrett Walker he was a 66% free throw shooter. And a lot of people say that translates to how good you're going to eventually shoot three-pointers if you have this stroke from there. Some other things about Jarrett Walker is he didn't even get to the rim. He's this big, strong guy who supposedly has really good handles. He does have a good feel for the game. He is a good passer, but whose hands are the ball going to be in? It's going to be in Cade or Ivy's hands a majority of the time. So, and then we want Duren to do a little play making. So we don't have the urgent need for a power forward that can make plays. You never can have enough players that can make plays. And so, I mean, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It's just that he's not as good at getting to the basket. He hardly even attacked the basket. A lot of the evaluators complain about how he would shoot floaters in different mid-range games because it was like he was almost afraid to get to the rim. So his three-point shooting is not good, and his free throw shooting is not good, and he doesn't get to the rim and finish good, and he doesn't even get many attempts at the rim playing in college. So there's just a lot of debate about that. And again, Cam Whitmore, there's, you look at his stats, he only averaged 12 points a game in some of his things, but he did have some negative things happen for him before the season started. He was injured, and here you are, one of the youngest freshmen in the country, and you're on this new team, and things aren't going well, but you have surgery on your thumb, so you miss the first 7 games. You miss all the preseason practices. You're behind as far as playing games are. You're a freshman to begin with, and so then you start and you're playing on a team that's struggling and has been a disappointment. So the coaching staff and the players on the team are, I think, a little bit panicked, and they didn't share the ball. They were ranked, I shared before, like 250th or 80th on assists for the season. They were a poor passing team. And so I think he was just thrown into not an ideal situation. Another thing I shared with you again is he's the youngest guy, and so many guys improved so much between their freshman and their sophomore year, or between their first year and their second year in college, or when they went to the NBA. And so I think that there's a really good chance that Cam is going to improve on his passing and things. Amen and Sawyer Thompson, again, those are two freak athletes, can really handle the ball, have struggled shooting. I shared with you, I'm concerned because they have a great reputation for how hard they work and how much they care. And so they've known that I've heard interviews where they said they know shooting's their weakness. And so they're in this academy, the Overtime Elite, and they're spending all their days in the gym, and they're working on their shooting, and they're 20 years old, and they're terrible shooters. And so that is a concern. And again, we don't, also, since we have Cade and Jaden Ivey, we don't need another ball handler, and that is where they're best with the ball in their hands, especially Amen. I'm not going to die. If we get Amen Thompson, it's not going to be the end of the world for me. It's going to be exciting. He's going to be fun to watch. no matter what. And I just don't know that he would be happy if he played on a team where he was the third ball handler on the team. So I just think that's not a good fit. He's not a good shooter. And so the combination of that, and so the same thing with Jarrett Walker. He's a 4 or 5, and he's a big. He's a bigger guy, and we have a whole bunch of big guys, and we need shooters. So I'm just not as high on him, and he isn't as good an athlete as he's a good athlete, but he's not even in the ballpark with Cam Whitmore. So I've heard some things about Anthony Black, that he was a 4-star recruit in football, and he had all these great records, and he's a great football player, and then he grew, and then he got different things happen. He has a crazy story. It's very fascinating, the story that he went through in his progression. But again, he's not a good shooter. I guess he has the best attitude of any player. He's smart, one of the smartest players. I've heard one evaluator say he has the highest IQ of anybody in this draft. And so but I just don't think that that's for the Pistons, because he is, again, a ball handler, and he is a non-shooter. So those are things. We need shooters, and we don't need ball handlers. So again, I think that he's just not a good fit. We got guys like Grady Dick, and I think Grady Dick is going to be a good pro, but he's not a good defender, not a great defender, and we need somebody that can defend. He's not a great athlete. He's a good athlete, and I mean, if you look at there's guys in the NBA that Duncan Robinson, that's playing in the NBA Finals, and he's had some moments in the NBA Finals, and I think that Grady Dick is going to be better defender, and most likely eventually just as good a shooter. So there's a lot of things that can happen in the draft, and we're going to go through that right now about what could happen and what trades might happen, and I just think it's going to be amazing, though. So everybody knows the Spurs are going to take Victor. A big thing, I've heard someone else, I didn't come up with this, but can you imagine Monty Williams, what he would have made if we had got the number 1 pick and we were able to take Victor? I'm sure that he would have signed on way earlier. We wouldn't have had to wait, and he would have signed for millions of dollars less. I mean, probably in the more than, save the Pistons more than $10 million throughout the life of his contract. I'm sure he probably would have signed for like $8 million a year instead of over $12 million a year. So, but that's interesting. We'll never know what would happen. But can you imagine my podcast? How many listeners I would have if we would have got Victor? I'd have thousands of listeners. So I thank each one of you for listening. But it would have changed the dynamics of everything for the Pistons had we got Victor. But I do think that Victor is going to be a great player. I think, but I still think. I don't think that they're going to win. I think, 3 years at the quickest before they're, a team that goes more than a round in the playoffs. So it's not just, it takes time for young guys, even for somebody as gifted and as tall as Victor. So that's another thing. But I do think, though, I've never heard anybody say this take yet. I do think he'll make the all-star team because I think he will get voted in as a starter. I think the hype around Victor all over the world is going to be so tremendous, and I think everybody's just going to vote for him, the fans. So I think that's going to happen. So then the Hornets, there's all this craziness about the Hornets got the 2nd pick, and they have their point guard, and the best prospect at 2 is Scoot. And they already have a point guard. So do they draft a point guard? Do they trade the pick? Or do they just go right out and draft Brandon Miller, that's what a lot of people think. So don't know what that can happen. But the Blazers is when it really gets crazy, because we still have heard Damian Lillard talk about wanting to stay there. But then he did leak out that, I would be interested in playing with Mikal Bridges with the Nets, or I would mind playing with Miami, because he's friends with Bam. So they could trade that pick. Could the Pistons trade that for that pick? And again, I thrown this out there before. I would trade the 5th pick, which they could turn into other assets, and I would give them everything. So Pistons are in a real unique situation that we really only have 3 players that we don't want to trade, and that's Cade, Jaden, and Jalen. And so other than that, we are open to trade players, and everybody, I think, is available. And we have the pick 31, the first pick in the 2nd round, also as a trade chip. So I think we have a lot of trade capital, more than most teams do, because we don't care if, sure, we like Bogey. I love Bogey. But if we trade him and get something of value, but we have more assets that we can throw in because we're playing the long game. We are not, this isn't our year. This upcoming season, we're not tanking, and we're trying to win games, and I think we're going to win again 15 wins more at least. And I think but we can trade Bogey because he's not going to be here when we're ready to really compete. And same with Burks, even though Burks is younger. And I'm not sure who would want Bagley, if they would, or Weissman, but we have those chips that we can throw in. Even Stu, if somebody, not sure how much value he has on the trade market, but we have all these trades, all these assets that we don't have to worry about. We can overpay even for the third pick. If we can throw in all these other pieces if teams want it. And again, we would probably have to take back some maybe bad contracts to make the money work. But if that puts us and gets us, if we want Brandon Miller, if that's who we want, we can get him at third. The interesting thing about all these trades, and we could talk about it right now, is that whether the Blazers trade their pick or not, it's most likely to happen on draft night, just before, right after the Hornets make their pick. So if the Blazers decided they want Brandon Miller, and the Hornets take Brandon Miller, and they don't want Scoot because they have too many guards, then maybe the Blazers would want to trade it. And the same thing could happen with the Rockets. The Rockets might, if the person that's there that they want is not there, then they might not make the trade. So the decision might have to be made on draft night just before the pick with a lot of these teams that decide to trade. So if Amen Thompson falls to 5th and the Pistons have the 5th pick, then teams are going to make, there's a very good possibility that somebody's going to value him a lot and want to jump up there and take him. So it's going to be really a fascinating night. Again, that's when a lot of trades are made on draft night. I'm guessing that other than the trade deadline, that there are more trades made on draft night than any other night. So, but we'll see. The Rockets are a wild card, so they, Cam Whitmore his stock seems to be rising, and so if they take him, I'd be heartbroken. And then, what do you do? Do you take Amen Thompson? I myself would take Taylor Hendricks, and I don't know if the Pistons would do that again. His floor is maybe as high as Amen Thompson's, and but he's a much better fit. And again, the 3-point shooting is something we need. We need more defense. He's a real good defender. I think that Amen Thompson and Asor are going to end up being really good defenders. But I still will say this. They played in the Overtime Elite. I heard a guy on the podcast today go off on how the Thompson twins played in Europe for 6 games, and they played well. So, but that's 6 games is nothing. And the European teams, some of those teams have been good historically, but that doesn't mean they were good this year. I'm not sure, so I'm not an expert on European basketball and which teams were really legit or not. But here's the thing. So Overtime Elite, they were the Thompson twins were 2 years older than most of the players on any of the teams they were playing against. And they were 2 of the biggest guys, and they're 2 of the best athletes. Everybody's saying they're going to be 2 of the best athletes in the NBA, but they're playing against mediocre competition. Nobody in Overtime Elite is even a prospect for the NBA besides the Thompson twins. Yet, they're playing in their tournament at the end of the year, and Asur had to make a 3 at the buzzer for them to win. And so how good are they if they struggle against players that are younger than them, that are not great players, and they still had both of them on the stacked team, and they still barely won. So again, I wouldn't be the end of the world if we took one of them. I'm going to cheer them on and hope that they end up being great, which they very likely could be. But there's a lot of things that can happen. The Magic have the 6th pick and the 11th pick. So there's even rumors that if they had somebody at pick 5 or 4 that they wanted, that they would trade 6 and 11 for 5. Well, I might do that, especially because I love Taylor Hendricks. So if I could get Taylor Hendricks at 6 and then get the 11th pick and get another good player, I would be willing to do that, and we could throw in Bogey. They need 3-point shooting. We could throw in our 31st pick. We have lots. Again, we have all those assets I shared that we can throw into any trade that can make it, sweeten the pot a little bit. So, not that will happen. So we'll, but they are a threat, and they're also a threat to trade up to get the Rockets pick for 6 and 11. So that would not at all surprise me. So Pacers are another team. So the Pacers have lots of picks. So it's interesting. The Pacers have 7, 26, 29, 32, and 55. So they're not going to keep all their picks. They want to more or less win now. So if they traded up to the Pistons for 5 and gave us 5 and 26, gave us 7 and 26 for 5, that is a deal that maybe we could do. But I would just be scared, because then if we didn't at least get Taylor Hendricks, I would be heartbroken especially if we could have got Cam Whitmore. So again, a lot of things can happen. There are a lot of teams with multiple picks. The Hornets have pick 2, pick 27, and pick 34. And so those are real valuable. Like I said, the Magic have 6 and 11, and they also have 36. The Blazers have 3 and 23. And if they want to win now, they're going to want to trade those picks. I will say this. Some people suggest they should trade Shaedon Sharpe to get a veteran player that's going to be good, but they're not going to trade Shaedon Sharpe. I would give them the 5th pick and whatever else they wanted besides those 3 untouchable guys, if they would give us Shaedon Sharpe, but they're not going to do that. They know what they have. So the Jazz are an interesting team. They have 9, 16, and 11. So do you trade 9 and 16? I'm real confident that Taylor Hendricks isn't going to be there at 9, and so I'm not sold at that. But 9 and 16 have good value. But again, there's a bunch of guys that are going to be there, that like Anthony Black, Asor, or Amen Thompson, and they're guys that need the ball in their hands and that are non-shooters. So that's why I'm not sold on getting 9 and 11. But you'd have to see on draft night. The hard thing is, if you're picking 5, you can't wait and see what's going to go at 9. If he's going to be available at 9, that's the thing that stinks. So the Rockets have picks 4 and 20, and so that they could trade 20 there. They have a lot of young guys. So teams like Oklahoma City, it's going to be interesting. They have so many picks in the first round for the next whole bunch of years. So they just made a trade, and this is the first trade of the year, and it gets me excited that trades are going to start happening. Most trades and the rumors really start after the playoffs get over. So as soon as the playoffs get over, I think things are really going to start to break. The rumor mill is going to really pick up. But Oklahoma City traded the Denver Nuggets. And so if you're still playing during the season, you can't trade players, but you can only trade draft picks. So the Nuggets traded their 2029 first-round pick, and I don't know what the protections are on that. And they traded it to Oklahoma City for the Thunder's 24th first-round pick and second-round pick, and a 23rd second-round pick this year. So the Thunder have multiple picks in the 2024 draft, and so they're going to trade. The Nuggets will get the worst pick, whichever of the 2 picks they have in the first round. Whichever pick is worse, then that's the one the Nuggets will get. But anyway, the OKC, they just got to push it down the floor. They can't even roster all the players and all the draft picks that they've got. So that's a place that somebody's going to be able to get some good deals from them, some young prospects, because they're not going to be able to keep all of them. They have so many picks. So another thing that's going to happen is the new collective bargaining thing is going to make it so teams have to unload players. And that's another fascinating thing. That the Pistons could jump in and get a bargain on a veteran player, because these teams now, that with the new collective bargaining agreement, they're going to, teams that are over the second apron, which is like gazillions of dollars, those teams are going to be so penalized worse than they are now, more than just money. They're not going to be able to sign a mid-level exemption, and they're not going to be able to trade as easily for players. They're going to have to take back exactly the same numbers. They're going to have to get the last pick in the draft if they go over a certain amount. So they're really handcuffing teams, so they're not going to want to do that. So now teams are going to have to be proactive and trade players that are even they value, and the Pistons have the flexibility and the cap space to jump in there. There's only like 7 teams that have cap space. So teams like the Warriors, what are they going to do? They got to re-sign Clay and Draymond to giant contracts. So is Jordan Poole going to be available for, some people think his contract's a little bit high, and he had a poor playoff series this year, but he has loads of talent. I'm not sure that the Pistons need him. And again, I think he would be a really good player if his shot selection was better. He's been around Steph and watched Steph take all those crazy shots, and he thinks he can make them. I think that Kuminga, I talked about him. I would love to trade for him. He has lots of upside, and he's on a cheap contract, and we could trade them. Bogey, who is on a low contract, and our 31st pick, in this year's draft, pick 31. And so there's players like that can be traded for. A player that I'm fascinated about is Bruce Brown, who's playing for Denver right now and is a real valuable piece to their team. But the Pistons drafted him a long time ago in the second round, but he's still only 26 years old. So he shot 48% from the field and 36% on threes and averaged 11.5 points, but he'd be a great player to come off our bench and play the wing. He's a tough defender. He's really can knock down the corner 3. I think even probably if you find out his catch and shoot numbers from 3 are pretty good from the corners. But the problem is because Denver, they don't have the flexibility. They can't sign him for more than like $7 million. He has a player option for $6.8 million for next year. And so I think that we could, if we paid him like $11 million, but I think other teams are going to want to get him too. But that is a player that if we got the right contract that we could outbid Denver, because for whatever reason, because they only signed him just last year, they don't have the rights to extend him for some reason. So anyway, that's a lot of stuff. There's the Lakers. They're going to be wanting to improve for right now. They got LeBron and AD that are older. They have the 17th pick. The Heat had the 18th pick. They're going to want to improve their team. The Warriors have the 19th pick, although all those teams I think need to get some draft picks because draft picks are way cheaper. So the Nets have 2 picks at 21 and 22. So one of those picks could be in play. If the Blazers want to win now, the 23rd pick could be in play. So there's a lot of the Kings are, they're win now. The Grizzlies are win now, and they got 25 and 26. There's a bunch of teams in a row there that have decent picks that you don't know if you're going to get a real quality player, but they might be available if we wanted to trade for them. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this telecast, and I hope that you do something nice for somebody today. Thank you very much for listening. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe, and go Pistons.